Okay, in this series, we're going to look at how to look at chord sequences a little bit differently, and it may help you get the sound you're looking for. And this is especially helpful in dramatic music. And oh, by the way, I apologize for being gone a little while. I had to take a little break from YouTubing, but we're going to talk about progression versus retrogression. Well, everything nowadays is just called a chord progression when it's a series of chords. It doesn't matter if it's goal-oriented or not. And this is interesting because progression literally means goal-oriented. You're progressing towards something. So a lot of different styles, for instance, have a lot of dependence on whether it's goal-oriented sound or it's not goal-oriented sound. Even just we're going to just do mostly basic triadic music, and we're going to cover various things. But if I do something like this right away, somebody will just call this a chord progression. But I'm literally just doing parallel movement downwards with seventh chords, okay? Literally just, but with sevenths. Okay, so technically this is retrogression. It's not goal-oriented. Okay, the sequence is not producing strong progression or towards a certain goal. Goal progression is goal-oriented based on fourth and fifth root movement. That's pure progression. If you ever play something like 1-4-5, those two intervals are favored between that the tonal center. Or if you ever do something like 1-4-7-3-6-2-5-1, that's all pure goal-oriented. It sounds like it flows naturally without, and it sounds like one thing just inevitably goes to the next thing if I just improvise in this. Okay, it sounds very goal-oriented. It reaches its goal, the end, that end chord. It doesn't matter if I use borrowed chords doing the same thing, same kind of root movement, fourth and fifth based, okay? It still works. Secondary dominants, for instance, resolve in a goal-oriented fashion. It sounds like it just flows one right into the next, and even throwing in a borrowed chord there, it all works. And I'm just using fourth and fifth based root movement. I'm not talking about the inversion, but root movement. Retrogression is not so goal driven. And we're just going to call it retrogression, movement based on seconds and thirds. And this might be something that you may end up using because a lot of styles rely on this for delay tactics and whatnot, especially dramatic styles. So like root movement down a third, down a second, down a second, down a second, down a second. Okay, I'm playing an A. We're not doing any, I'm not notating any examples in this. I'm just explaining what's the difference. So let's just do let me improvise in retrogression. Notice the kind of different sound that we have now compared to like the secondary dominants in the fourth and fifth bass movement. It sounds a little bit more like it's yearning to resolve. Without any of that strong fourth and fifth based goal-oriented thing, it tends to produce a yearning sound. It always wants to go somewhere and it never quite resolves, like fourth and fifth based root movement, okay? So these two things can be combined though, progression and retrogression, not goal-driven with goal-driven. Up a fourth, down a second. Up a third, up a fourth, down a second. So it sounds like it's yearning. Now, up a third, up a diminished fifth, down a fifth, up a fourth. So the ending was, the last three were pure progression, okay? So we have that sense of uncertainty up until the last three, which are pure progression. If I do something like this, it sounds like it's yearning, it wants to end. But we're not letting it, we're teasing the listener, okay? Now we'll let it end. Sense of relief, okay? That's why you'd use that's why you want to distinguish between progression and retrogression. So between the F and the E, that's not goal-oriented, or neither is the E to the G. But we could throw in one fourth move there and it doesn't matter until it starts becoming more fifth-based, like here. Fifth and fourth based. you start to get a sense of relief. So a lot of retrogression is going to cause a lot of yearning, okay? And it's going to produce that, and even if you're in key, it's going to produce that, and we're going to show that later in this series. I'm not writing anything out. I just want you to distinguish between progression and retrogression, because nowadays we just call everything a progression. But if you see this little difference, progression's very goal oriented. It has that sound to where your ear just kind of expects the next move. Retrogression does not. It has that yearning kind of thing going on where your ear does not really quite expect it, but it's a very powerful tool, especially if you write dramatic music. Using a lot of retrogression will actually help you avoid any sense of finality that progression provides, pure progression. So if you distinguish between the two, it will actually help you create dramatic music better, because you're going to know right away that if you start using a lot of retrogression, it's going to start producing a lot of yearning. And yearning, I mean by it feels unresolved. It lacks that sense of strong resolution that pure fifth and fourth bass progression has. So keep that in mind when you start watching this series. And we're going to take stuff from modes to modulation and just show you how that yearning effect and intermixed with progression can give you like a sense of dramatic feel. And by the way, my disclaimer is always I'm not a keyboard player, so ignore my playing and my improvisations. We're just trying to get a point across harmonically. So the next video we'll talk about in-key retrogression and give out a few examples and how to use that as a delay tactic towards your finality.